All right, great. So, hey, we got Jared here from the Share Group joining us.
Part
Jared,
two.
yeah, I know, part two. No, it was a great conversation last time. Let's keep it going. But wanted
Absolutely.
to, there's a hot button issue going on right now, right? It's a hot button issue. People are asking. You've been jumping into the Facebook group, providing some wisdom and some information for folks because there's a lot of misinformation out there too. A lot of concern, a lot of anxiety, and all of it regarding to it came to light because Call Tools, a dialer that we work with a lot that we've recommended in the group, they came back and they shut down all dialing of any number on the national do not call list. And even if you had, like a relationship and it was compliant and everything, they would shut you down anyway. It was kind of a crazy,
Right.
little bit heavy-handed approach to what they were doing. But,
Right.
it started a conversation, started a good conversation of, hey, what if we're doing outbound calling? How concerned should we be? What precautions can we take to make sure things are done the right way?
Right.
And you chimed in with some really great insights. So Jared, why don't you talk a little bit about, because,
Yeah.
a lot of folks doing outbound calling.
Yeah. No, 100%. And, going back, Gus, to my early days, early 2000s, I worked for a database compiler, and I'll never forget when the do not call came out and the restrictions of you can register 5 area codes and get a subscription account number to be able to get scrubbed phone numbers. And so the laws have changed so much the last 20 years, but at the end of the day, the do not call is out there, for a reason, right? For people to protect their home number and, the cell phone. And a lot of people are just throwing those numbers out there as much as they can, any kind of number. Like I have 5 cell phones in my family, 3 of them are my kids. Yeah. Do we put that on the do not call? We do. But to kind of answer your setup here is really, you need to understand what you're working with when you buy a telephone marketing list, right? First, the rules of the federal do not call, and what are some of the exemptions, like political party, right? Survey related. And so a lot of the home conversation revolves around that gray area of not really selling anything, but just asking them if they want a fair offer for their property. And so there's a way you could play the gray side of it all, through your communication and your initial conversation. But furthermore, the cell phone opportunity, just because of the internet and the way we capture that email and that phone number, there's a privacy policy. There's an opt-in that is trumping the do not call. So the verbiage reads, by clicking this, you're opting in to receive third-party information, even if your phone number is on the do not call. And they're clicking that. So we have had very little instances of the do not call and that information come up. And we're able to go back and show them, where that homeowner had opted in to receive third-party information.
Yeah,
so it's very comforting.
And if just so if you were doing an outbound calling campaign with Call Tools and you couldn't come up with that opt-in information, they weren't going to let you call.
They won't let you call.
Yeah,
right.
100%.
So a lot of these dialers, Call Tools, Mojo, even Vulcan 7, they license or they suppress the do not call numbers as you load them into their dialer, or they flag them. A data provider like the Share Group, we license the state and federal do not call. But if we were to suppress those records from our day-to-day business, you wouldn't have 80% of the phone numbers that are available, right? So I think the most important piece here, Gus, is knowing the data sources you're utilizing, right? You can flag the do not calls if you have an existing database. I put a little message together yesterday about this. Even if it's an existing database and you want us to flag the do not calls, cell phones, landlines, you can really dig in and identify what your customer database looks like. But I think it's important to know that where you're getting the data from, that they do know how to handle and deal with the do not call, because it is becoming a more popular conversation, just like we're talking about through your Facebook group and a lot of the red flags that people throw out there, but to me, at the end of the day, there's ways to do it correctly that you are not in any violation of any laws. And we pride ourselves on being very conservative, in a non-conservative world of outbound marketing.
Yeah, 100%. And there was also that Keller Williams lawsuit. That's another thing you chimed in as well. I thought that was a really interesting one because I think there's a lot of confusion for folks when you're talking about, I think that specific lawsuit is about ringless voicemails or even cold text messages. There's people out there, not with our company, but there's people out there that do outbound prospecting with text messages. So they're going to blanket carpet bomb people with text messages. And I go, you really want to get in trouble, you should try something like that, because that's going to get people's attention.
Yeah, that's where you're going to
be happy about it, right?
And we try to advise and have a conversation around ways to communicate via, ringless voicemails was such a wholesale activity, an investor activity in 2016, 17, 18 that has now started to get some traction again as the market has shifted, trying to find more people in, quote unquote distress. They feel like that ringless voicemail is the opportunity to do so. To me, like, the relationships built on that phone call, you have someone like an expert like Brandon Mulrennan that's very big on, getting in on the phone and building that relationship. To me, a ringless voicemail doesn't really do that. And a text is kind of a loss leader, right? Like, it is a numbers game, and it allows you conversions, and I know it does work, but the laws do read that you need to have an existing relationship with who you're texting, and as a company, as a data provider for us that's sending data to the advertiser, the real estate agent, the real estate investor, we are, putting the onus on them that the terms that they have and how they need to learn to navigate through the data. But it doesn't mean we won't support, and help through, those things that they do come up, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it can be a minefield. I think it can cause people a lot of anxiety. What I tell folks when they're concerned about these things is, number one, you got to be smart about it, right? You got to get the right data. Do not just grab a list and call it willy-nilly, without even thinking about these issues, right? That's why you should have a trusted data provider. You should have a trusted dialer. You got to put these systems together. 10 years ago, no one cared about this. I'll be honest with you. I mean, people were dialing left and right. It didn't matter. They couldn't care less. And, I was at Keller Williams. I saw the guys too. I was at Keller Williams. Yeah. I learned how to do this at Keller Williams. They were telling everybody, pick up the phone, use the automation, boom, boom, boom. And, again, you can argue whether that was a good idea or not, right? The results speak for themselves. I'll say that. But the times have changed, right? This is not 10 years ago, right? You can't just do that willy-nilly and don't think you're going to get into trouble eventually if you're not even taking some basic precautions.
Totally. And there is ways to dial unique phone numbers. I think the share group is different in the expired or for sale by owner avenue, where everyone and their brother is touching them, where our data sets are a little bit more unique or less stepped on from the competition, that it will, play into come into play when you're hitting an expired listing from the same brokerage in a big city. You're going to immediately get that red flag. So I can see how it comes to fruition. But there is ways to flag your database with the cell phone, landline, do not call, state do not call, federal do not call. We license it all. We're very conservative. I think the two steps that you can do is, understand what you're doing, and then, like you said, Gus, have a plan. Like, be very survey oriented in your initial calls. If you do want to include do not call.
I want to say that probably the largest campaign we've ever done that was an outbound campaign. This is one particular company. They had, I think, at 20 or 25 callers on it at one time, doing outbound every day. So this was millions of calls, a year, millions of calls. And they, it was a startup company. They were, so they were concerned about the regulation and being compliant. And the way they did it was a survey solution. Yeah. That's what they did. Yeah. That's what they did. And we made millions of calls and never had an issue.
I think you can adjust your script and be in non-violation of the do not call, and obviously flagging and marking those phone numbers and prioritizing, what your tier one is, the ones that are not on the do not call, or the cell phones that are opted in. And that's how you handle it. That makes perfect sense. When you're dialing a lot of numbers like that, Gus, you better have a plan of attack.
No, they were, well funded. They wanted to make sure they were doing things in a compliant way, and they wanted to call the whole country. That was another. I don't know if it's a pro or a con, but since they were going to be calling, the whole country, they didn't want to take any risks, right? You know what? You don't want to be in violation. We don't want to, want to do things the right way. And it wasn't not calling. The solution was don't call. That was not the solution.
Right.
It was called in a compliant way.
Adjust your messaging. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. And we ran that campaign for 2 years, right? So 2 years, millions of calls every year. Yeah. So it was like millions upon millions of calls. And we didn't have one issue with that campaign.
Right.
Not
I think
a single complaint, not a single, violation, nothing like that. So
we
I tell
we
folks it's
built.
important.
That's crazy. That's amazing for 2 years too. We built a couple of databases and some calling campaigns around like timeshare relief, right? You dabble in solar. Majority of our customers are real estate, but timeshare is a straight sales message.
Yeah.
Real estate, you can cater it towards a survey type conversation and still, cover your bases. So I feel that the real estate space is a lot safer. It can be protected. The data speaks to itself, the way it's compiled, that you can still have a very successful outbound calling program in real estate, even during these, turbulent times when everyone's kind of trying to figure out what's going on with the do not call, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, it's a tricky one, Jared. So the standard disclaimer applies. I'm not a lawyer, neither's Jared,
yeah.
Right?
I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but
exactly, right. That's as far as our qualifications go. If you have a specific question, talk to your managing broker, talk to your attorney if you want the legal response. We're talking about our own experience. This isn't legal advice. But we're probably some of the top experts that are doing this in the whole country, right? So we have a pretty wide breadth of experience. So there's when we tell you there's definitely ways to be compliant and do this. The solution isn't don't ever call. I don't think that's the solution, right?
I don't believe either.
It's do it in a smart way. Think through these issues, ahead of time, and just because I think before this was 10 years ago. I don't want to say that my Keller Williams corporate told me to do this.
Right.
Among the agents in the room was just be nice to them. Just be nice, and no one's going to sue if you're nice. No one would ever sue.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
that was
That's
as far as that was as far as our compliance training would tell. If they're on the just apologize, be nice to them, and you'll be fine.
There's something to be said about Keller Williams and how they train, though, because when we first started getting leads from Brandon, his referrals in 2017-18, I would get excited every time a Keller Williams lead came across because I knew they had the work ethic. I knew they had the skills to want to go out and hustle. And, you and I are teaching, we're the treasure map to the gold. I always say this, but we're teaching people to go do the work, right? So it's harder for us to get people motivated, but at the end of the day, if you put the work in, you will have the successes. And people like Keller Williams and EXP and some of these other brokerages are really doing the work. But you and I, as the experts, are out here spitting knowledge about there is ways to be smart about it and get around it. And hit us both up, so we're here to definitely help.
Absolutely. We're a resource, and thank you so much, Jared, for jumping into the group. Your insight, your knowledge, because there's definitely a way to do this, doing it the right way. So appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. And I'll see you in the group on the next.
Yeah, let's do this, man. This is part 3 coming up next, brother.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, man.
Appreciate you, man. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.